us full circle. So was there ever a time in the gathering of information during the initial process, did you say, this isn't good, let's just forget it?
The first day? You're talking about the story itself?
Yeah, just continuing to write this book and having it eventually turn into this?
Yeah, like I say, yeah, there was some times that I thought certain parts were a little too dry, and in all the interviews we've done across the country and book reviews and things like that, we've had a couple people say, well, he kind of writes it like Jason did this and Jason did that, an A, B, C, type thing, which is probably just a product of me not being an overall nonfiction writer. But no, I never wanted to set it down. Like I say, once I really got into it and I understood what was going on, I felt like this player's story needed to be told. And as a matter of fact, before the book came out, we contacted Michelle Hernandez, and I'll never forget this. He sent us an email back and in broken English basically said, thanks for telling my story. And because, I think that he thought he was so small and insignificant, especially in the same room, with the Yankees and Major League Baseball and things like that. I think he just thought he was, crumbled up and thrown in the trash. And so no, at a certain point, I wanted to tell the story just for him, if nothing else.
And you talked about the story. I know that I've read the book. I have an autographed copy. I feel pretty special. So, but let's hear the story. Let's. I know we only have so much time, but certainly, Jason, I'd love to hear how the story starts and how it develops.
Okay. The beginning of the story is it started again in 2002, December of 2002. Anybody here that knows me understands, again, my passion for the game of baseball, my absolute unwavering love for it. Again, in my mind, the older I get, the better I was at playing. That said, my skill level, I had a Hall of Fame passion, but like a bad news bearer skill level, if you will.
Can I use that? I'm going to write
Absolutely. That just came to me without anything. So that said, I knew I wasn't going to go beyond the collegiate level playing ball. I knew I wasn't going to get drafted. In fact, one of my favorite stories is I had a scout talk to me once when I was in college, after I had pitched and made an appearance, and apparently I did fairly well. The scout approached me and said, you did a great job today, enjoyed watching you, threw a lot of strikes, got the guys out, you have a wonderful changeup. And I told him, I didn't throw a changeup all day. So that's a testament to my fastball that I did have. So understanding I wasn't going to be able to play beyond the college level, I went to law school with the intent solely to become a sports agent, to stay in baseball somehow. So I suffered through 3 years of law school to become an agent. Eventually, I became a certified agent with the Major League Baseball Players Association. And through that, I had an opportunity to meet, his name is Senor Gustavo Recalde, who was the owner of the Yucatan Lions. It's a Mexican league team, the Yucatan Lions in the Yucatan Peninsula. In this December of 2002 at the Major League Baseball winter meetings. And my introduction, the reason for my introduction with Senator Recalde was he needed an attorney to basically pursue the New York Yankees for a breach of contract. He being the president and owner of Yucatan Lions, had entered into an agreement with the New York Yankees in November of 1996. The subject of the contract was Michelle Hernandez, a player from Cuba who had defected at the ripe old age of 17 on October 31st, 1996. My client, Senator Recalde, he defected while in Mexico. Bear with me here. Michelle Hernandez defected while in Mexico at the age of 17. My client in Mexico took him in, fed him, clothed him, housed him. My client had a previous relationship with the New York Yankees, and from that relationship called the Yankees first and foremost and said, hey, I have a player here that just defected from Cuba. He's a catcher, 17 years old. Do you have any interest in seeing this kid? The Yankees immediately boarded a plane from Miami to the Yucatan Peninsula to scout this particular player. Point one, that is a violation of the Cuban embargo that the United States has. That is also a violation, to a lesser degree, Major League rules. The Yankees knew that. They disregarded that, boarded the plane anyway to come see this kid play in Mexico. A high-up executive in the Yankees organization arrived in Merida, Mexico. That's where the Yucatan Lions play, under cover of night, with instructions that no media were to be present during the workout of this particular player. They shielded him in a car, took him to Yucatan's facility, worked him out essentially under cover of darkness. Nobody knew he was there. Nobody was to know he was there, and more importantly to the Yankees, nobody was to know that the Yankees were there scouting this particular player. The Yankees liked what they saw. Therefore, they entered into an agreement with Senor Recalde, the Yucatan Lions, and the terms were fairly simple. In the event that this kid makes the Yankees roster at any time, the New York Yankees will pay the Yucatan Lions $500,000. Okay. At the time, that's what they deemed the fair market value for this particular player to be. The kid Hernandez was then taken under the Yankees' wing, handed off to other Yankee personnel, and flown to Venezuela under the false identity of other Yankee personnel, false passport, false visas, to live in Venezuela at their baseball academy for a couple of years until he could make it to the States. Eventually makes it to the States and onto the Yankees roster. The Yankees roster in November of 2002. So what does that do? That prompted the need for the Yankees to pay $500,000. My client, Senor Recalde, like any businessman would, called the Yankees and said, Michelle's on your roster, I'll take my $500,000. Well, guess what you think the Yankees said to that? The Yankees said in so many terms, we don't know anything about this agreement. We consider this fraud. We're not going to cut you a $500,000 check. Then comes me. So what I just conveyed to you is a very short story of what Senor Recalde is telling me at the winter meetings in 2002. He follows that story up with a request of me that I never in my life thought would ever be made of me, wherein he asked me to draft a demand letter to the New York Yankees for payment of $500,000. Let's not forget, too, that I'm 29 years old at the time, a lawyer in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and my demand letters were to, let's just say not the New York Yankees. So, okay. Draft a letter to the Yankees in my best legalese as possible. I get zero response from the Yankees. The Yankees fan who was here, this is what we would anticipate. Client advises me to send one more demand letter before we move forward. So I send one more demand letter, which does elicit a response from the General Counsel of the New York Yankees. Now, let me back up. The General Counsel, his name is Lon Trost, is about 4'2", and had been with George Steinbrenner since Steinbrenner bought the Yankees from CBS in 1973. I don't know if anybody here is aware of George Steinbrenner or his temperament or his mentality, but you can envision what his attorney was like. Him his response was in an email to me that advised me that he had indeed received my demand letter for $500,000, that the New York Yankees considered that to be fraud and a shakedown of the Yankees organization, and that he was going to proceed to go to the FBI, other federal authorities, state authorities, Major League Baseball's investigation unit, and anybody else he saw fit to come after me, my children, and my pets.
Were you ever nervous when you drafted this letter? Were you ever nervous about writing? Did you read it? I could imagine somebody reading it over 20 times and just going Yankees.
Drafting the letter and sending off the letter was, I was not nervous at all. Receiving this email, I literally remember the day sitting back in my chair thinking to myself, what in the world have I gotten myself into? The short story is, I call a witness of mine who was a former scout of the Yankees. He's a very integral party, a very integral witness in the book, you'll see, and advised him of the Yankees' response. And his response to me, after he stopped laughing, was, tell them to go, where, and call the commissioner's office, because the commissioner's office is already aware of this. I said, well, okay. I called the commissioner's office and advised them of our demand and some of the issues regarding Michelle's defection and the contract or whatsoever, and the scout was right. They had indeed been contacted and were aware of this particular issue. Not all the facts, but were aware of it. And from that conversation, I calmed down, felt a little better about my position, about myself, and my law license, and B, I was given the green light by the commissioner's office to file a grievance, which essentially was a breach of contract claim against the Yankees. So that was a bit of the backdrop of how the grievance started.
And no pets were harmed in the writing of the book or with the Yankees?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And Clay, take it from there. You looked through a lot of information as far as how this process worked its way through, and eventually, I don't want to give away the ending, but it's a pretty good one. But certainly, you pick up the story from there about how basically Jason went through and defeated the Yankees.
Well, to try to, I guess, get through a lot of this in such a short amount of time, ultimately the commissioner's office agreed to hear this grievance, that they were going to be the arbitrator, I guess, in this grievance. The commissioner's office scheduled some depositions for, it was, I guess, a couple of years prior to the ending of this in Tampa, Florida. Prior to a couple of days before the depositions were to begin, this witness that Jason mentioned earlier forwarded Jason some documents. And
Unbeknownst to me at the time, let's not forget that. I did not know who they came from when I received them.
oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. And an anonymous FedEx package that contained a couple of documents. And one of them was supposedly from the desk of Gordon Blakely, one of the gentlemen from the Yankees who went down to Mexico to scout Michelle Hernandez. And in it, he discusses, he's basically asking why the Yankees are giving him such a hard time on reimbursements for several different trips he took, and he just happens to go into, I spent a lot of money out of pocket bribing, this player and that player in Japan and all this other stuff. The second document is a handwritten document that we believe was from the agent that the Yankees hired to come into Mexico to get Michelle Hernandez out of Mexico. And in this document, it basically lays out a kickback scheme between Gordon Blakely and this agent. It listed several players, what these players were going to sign for, what the agent was going to get, and then what the agent was going to kick back to the executive at the Yankees, or the head of international scouting. This was nothing, short of a bombshell. He forwarded that, because it was basically evidence in a trial, I guess, had to forward that to all parties involved. I believe it was the day before, or maybe even the day of the depositions, when everybody's getting ready to fly down to Tampa. All of a sudden, the depositions were canceled. Because the commissioner's office, the Yankees, defense team all received these documents and basically canceled at the 11th hour. Now, this perplexed Jason, obviously. I think at that point he really knew he was onto something. There were some other things going on behind the scenes other than the Hernandez case here, and needless to say, they ended up rescheduling depositions in New York City, and which I spoke of earlier at the commissioner's office, and to me that's the coup de grace of the book. There's some amazing quotes there where his witness just absolutely throws the Yankees under the bus. He was one of the two people from the Yankees that went down to Mexico. He was no longer with the Yankees at the point of the depositions, and this guy wasn't afraid to say anything, and he just told it like it was, and some of the stuff that came out was just amazing, and Yankees counsel had to stop him several times and basically threaten him that they were going to end depositions if he didn't stop talking about all this. Had to do with Cuban defectors and hiding Cuban defectors in their houses and falsifying documents, and basically at that point, it's in some interviews we've done, one gentleman out of California said, well, the international scouting sounds like the wild, wild west. And I said, well, that's a perfect term for it. It really is, because outside the borders of the United States, almost anything goes. And, they're willing to do anything to get these players. I guess I'd probably defer to Jason on the actual depositions, because that's a whole other story within itself.
Well, let me explain. I liken this case at the time to either a puzzle or like an onion, if you will. It's like just multiple layers, layer upon layer. And to get back to these mysterious documents that I received via FedEx, again with no return address, I read through them, and I'm taken aback. I'm excited, because one of the witnesses that I was about to depose is named all over them, and so I thought that was going to be fantastic evidence. It's a good reflection of how he did work in the international market, and I thought that was going to be compelling to the Bud Selig, who was the arbitrator at the time, the commissioner of Major League Baseball. When I received the documents, again, not knowing where they came from, again, the first phone call I made was to the scout, the former scout of the Yankees. He was with the Reds at the time, so therefore I could communicate with him directly. Okay, I called him, and I said, "You're never going to believe what I got in the mail." And I described him to him, and he laughed again. And I said, "What's up?" He said, "Well, I sent you those." My response was, "Well, thank you, but how in the world do you have these documents?" And that's when he kind of crawfished a bit and said, "I'm not going to reveal that to you. I just know somebody still in the Yankees office in Tampa that obtained these documents and provided them to me." Okay. That said, I'm liking what I see in the documents. Pursuant to our protocol throughout the agreements, I had an obligation to provide them to the Yankees as well as to the commissioner's office. We had to exchange everything that we wanted to use as evidence. The depositions were scheduled for some Monday in June of 2004, and it was Friday around 5 or 5:30 that the Yankees counsel called me after having received these documents from me, canceling the depositions. The depositions were rescheduled for September of 2004. However, this time they weren't in Tampa, and they were in Tampa originally because that's where the Yankees' home office is. That's where George Steinbrenner lived. Okay? So I was going into their backyard to do this, which is fine. I figured, hell, if I've already demanded $500,000 from one, I'll go to their backyard and demand $500,000. So, Commissioner's office has these documents. And this time, they intervene and say, you will have these depositions in New York City at the commissioner's office, where the commissioner can then police this activity, these depositions. That was like the holy grail for me, having that opportunity to be able to go to the commissioner's office and quiz a Yankee front office executive. I mean, it's an analogy I use all the time, but, that was my at-bat in the big leagues, if you will. I'm there and where Bud Selig conducts business, and let me back up. Bud Selig is the commissioner of Major League Baseball, and Clay referenced that he was the arbitrator over this particular proceeding. Who here knows who hires and pays Bud Selig, the commissioner of Major League Baseball? The owners. Who is one of the owners in Major League Baseball? George Steinbrenner. He's 1/30th. So he, at this time, is paying 1/30th of Bud Selig's $12 million a year salary. I don't... I'm not going to say any more to that. Anyway, so the commissioner's office obviously has an interest now that I've provided these documents. And they ordered us to come to New York City to do depositions. And the deposition is really sort of the climax of the story, because that's where a lot of stories and a lot of, backroom dealings in the international market come out. And not only come out, but come out under oath. Because these depositions were recorded and they were transcribed and they were under oath to be used in a hearing. And so that event in and of itself, the week I spent in New York taking these depositions, is something I will never, ever forget in my life. Not only because the way the Yankees treated me, which was not well, but just to know and reflect back that I was there by myself with a client that didn't speak any English. In fact, he may not even know my name, to be honest with you. And I'm sitting across the table from two outside counsel of the New York Yankees, Montrose, the 4'2" guy, and the assistant general manager of the Yankees. So I'm sitting across this, conference room table that's a block long by myself on one side, and they have all their boxes and their attorneys and their suits on the other side. And it painted a fun picture. And so that was a week I will never, ever forget.
As, all three of us are baseball fans, I know there's a lot out here. Did going through this process for both of you, now that you saw Jason's story, did it maybe make you less of a baseball fan from knowing maybe what goes on behind closed doors?
For me, absolutely not. I mean, I love the game from the physical aspect, the actual playing of the game. And being an agent, obviously I had always had an interest in the business side of it as well. And wanting to be an agent, you have to understand the business side of it. It didn't sour me by any means at all. I'm not too naive to think that things of this nature don't occur. But just how obstinate the Yankees were and their dealings with the commissioner's office and me throughout this process, and we may get to this later, but eventually how this particular matter was resolved, that was a little more eye-opening. Now, what this front office executive was doing, Gordon Blakely, in regard to bribery and so on and so forth, that didn't sour me by any means. But what Bud Selig, the commissioner's office, the New York Yankees eventually did, that turned me a little bit.
Clay?
No, I would say it didn't sour me towards baseball, because I kind of look at this as just a couple of bad apples. We're asked all the time, how pervasive is this in baseball? Obviously, we don't know. I'm sure it happens other places, other teams. It probably happens in other sports. So, from the fundamental boys of summer, view of baseball that I have, no, I would say it did not jade my view.
We're going to open up to questions from you guys here in a second, but I have this great idea, probably something you never heard before, but maybe you guys should make this into a movie. No, I'm kidding, but you guys have heard that before, that this would obviously, obviously makes a great book, and it's available for $15 outside. What's up, so, you're getting cut, right? But obviously, we talked about a movie, right?
Well, before I get to that, if I could say, originally we had it priced, it's no longer priced at, but originally it was priced at $19.73, and I don't know if anybody here caught when I said when George Steinbrenner bought the Yankees in 1973, so that was my little jab at him, if you will.
Careful of your pets now if you start making fun of jokes.
Exactly, but yes, in regard to a movie, we've done multiple radio interviews throughout the country in various, sports affiliates, and that's the very last question of every interview we've had is the idea of a movie, especially with Moneyball having come out and been a success, and this whole David Goliath, theme, and obviously that got us to thinking, some of this is perhaps Grisham-esque, if you will, and yes, we've had an opportunity to meet with a Hollywood writer, and he has actually produced and drafted what's called a treatment for a movie, and so we're currently in the process, if anybody's interested, in selling this treatment to production companies to hopefully eventually turn this into a full-length feature.
Of course, he insists that Brad Pitt play him.
That's what's holding it back right now.
Brad's a little busy right now.
Yeah, he's got some things going on.
If you can't call me and ask her, I don't think I have any objection to that. But if I could, just, I don't want to give away too much of the ending here, but I think what's very compelling about the story, too, is that it started out me against the Yankees, understanding, the inherent conflict with Bud Selig being the arbitrator, with George Steinbrenner on the speed dial, but the way it resolved was extremely disheartening to me. It got resolved, but I'll just say that the Yankees didn't resolve it. I'll just say that the commissioner's office stepped up on behalf of the Yankees. After the depositions, through legal procedure, the Yankees, they asked Bud Selig to dismiss this case altogether. Said this is still a fraud, this is a shakedown, you need to dismiss this case. Don't need to bother us anymore. And Bud Selig said, no, I think there's enough issues here that I would like to hear and like to have fleshed out in a hearing. And when Bud Selig issued a written order and submitted that to me and to the Yankees counsel, I never heard from the New York Yankees again, and that was in August of 2005. I couldn't get their attorney on the phone. I couldn't get Ron Trost on the phone. I couldn't get any other representative of the Yankees on the phone at all. Once Bud Selig ordered the Yankees to go to a hearing with me, the Yankees, what I like to say, they completely defected themselves from the process altogether, and I have yet to this day to hear from the Yankees. And so when the issue for resolution came about, which it did, the commissioner's office essentially took care of it for the Yankees.
Very interesting. We will take questions from the panel. We'll take you in the back.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One, how long from start to finish did the book take? And my other question is, I know a lot of Major League Baseball teams go to Latin America because they don't have to pay the signing bonuses like they do to American players. Have y'all seen any other teams that may have done similar actions? And I do have a copy of the book.
First, yeah, from the writing standpoint, like I say, I guess it took me about a year and a half to 2 years, I guess, to get through all this stuff, and for the book to really start taking shape. And this was not doing it full-time, obviously. Following that, there was probably another 6 or 8 months of, heavy-duty editing and back and forth and switching things, and, before we got the final product. So, from beginning to end, I guess you could say it was around 3 years.
In regard to your second question, the players that are from Latin American countries, other than Puerto Rico, are not subject to the draft, so they can negotiate their signing bonuses more freely than a player that is drafted, because they have presumably all 30 teams to negotiate with as a free agent. Okay. That said, I can't tell you how pervasive this is, but I do know of a precedent involving Cuban players wherein the Los Angeles Dodgers were caught, if you will, having scouted and moved from Cuba two players to the Dominican Republic and signed those particular players, what I say, under the table, okay? Because they were free agents, but the Dodgers signed them without affording them the opportunity to be free agents, and the commissioner, Bud Selig, became aware of that in 1999, voided the contracts of those two players, and fined the Dodgers $200,000. That particular activity absolutely mirrored the activity that the Yankees were engaged in this particular agreements. And the Yankees, the commissioner's office refused to void Michel Hernandez's contract with the Yankees, and the commissioner's office never did fine the New York Yankees. So you can take from that what you will.
Just kind of picked up on something you talked about at the end. Also, I'm a huge baseball fan, have been my entire life. Have not read the book yet. Definitely going to buy and read it, looking forward to it. It didn't jade your view of baseball because you love baseball, and even after reading, I'm sure it won me, but did it jade your view of the professional side of baseball, of Major League Baseball, professional sports?
The business side of it?
Yeah, the business side of it. The game's the game, and it's played purely by the players. You love it. I love it, but from a business standpoint, from the professional standpoint, did it jade your view? And then also, too, is you fall for the Bud Selig thing. Bud Selig is the commissioner of baseball, even though he's paid by these 30 teams. He's still there to police the 30 teams. It's kind of a weird arrangement. How, obviously, you don't want to give away the ending, and I'll read it, but you were a little disappointed, but still, how did you feel how that worked out as far as his policing side, and were you surprised, not surprised in between?
Well, the business side, it definitely jaded my view, and how they handled these. And I hate to call him a kid, but he was a kid, and took advantage of this kid. And like I say, I don't know how often it happens. I'm sure it happens a lot. That definitely irritated me, to a great length. In fact, there's a quote in the book, and I think it was by Wrigley, who said baseball is too much of a business, or too much of a sport to be a business, and too much of a business to be a sport. And where does that line fit? I don't know. I mean, I love to watch baseball. The business side of it, they can have it. I definitely lost a lot of respect for some of those in the business side of it.
I'm emotionless, so I don't get you. But just one point. Ironically, the emergence of the commissioner came about after the Black Sox scandal.
Huge history thing.
Okay, well, the gambling, and Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landers was the first commissioner for that purpose, to curb these types of shenanigans, if you will. And yet, in this particular instance, I would suggest that he didn't engage in any policing activity whatsoever.
That's a baseball. I'll just put it nicely. I think a lot of baseball fans are not necessarily happy with Bud Selig as a commissioner.
Yeah.
Are there any constraints in you producing depositions in works of published fiction or nonfiction writing?
What happened here, no, not in this instance. What's interesting is, we detail this in the book, again, I don't want to reveal too much, but when I negotiated a settlement, I had to negotiate through the commissioner's office, okay? Because the Yankees weren't dealing with me at this point in time. And the commissioner's office prepared a settlement agreement for the Yankees and myself on behalf of Yucatan to sign. The Yankees never, ever signed that settlement agreement. And when it came time for the Yankees to pay the negotiated settlement amount, do you think the Yankees paid that amount? Again, the commissioner's office did. And so, it's a longer answer to your question. So the question in this particular instance, no.
Because then the settlement agreement actually have the confidentiality clause in it.
If the Yankees had signed this, and paid, this would never have come to light.
Was there oversight?
Well, let's not, the Yankees oversight, I'll let the audience answer that. Yes.
It may be important, but what were the contract terms that Hernandez was under during this time? How much was he being paid? Because this really was in reference to a breach of contract between the Yucatan team and the Yankees. But how did Hernandez benefit from this?
Okay, it's a great question, and I didn't get into this because we really kind of get into the minutia. I touch upon it in the book, Clay does, but Michel Hernandez was a free agent, okay? He didn't come to the States. He was a Cuban defector and was going to become a resident in another country that would allow him to stay a free agent, not be drafted, okay? The Yankees signed him under the table without the knowledge of any other teams. The Yankees did not give him the opportunity to negotiate with the other 29 teams. So the Yankees signed him to a minor league contract in May 1998 for $60,000, a $60,000 bonus, okay? And again, this gets into more of the business side of it, if you will, free agency and whatnot. It behooves players that are not from Canada, the U.S., or Puerto Rico to be free agents and not enter the draft. He was not eligible for the draft because he eventually became a Venezuelan citizen. So he signed with the Yankees without having been afforded the opportunity to negotiate with the other 29 clubs. And it's the backstory to that real quickly. He discovered somehow, some way, that perhaps his contract with the Yankees was illegal because there were some issues regarding his passport and his visa when he came to the States. He was here illegally, essentially, and he approached the commissioner's office and asked them to void his contract, and they refused to. And they even refused to void his contract after I filed my grievance and explained to the commissioner's office all of the events surrounding his defection and how he signed with the Yankees. They kept that information from him, and they kept the information from me that he had been begging them for years to void that contract. It's another little nugget in the story, too.
The more you know, yes.
Real quick, I've got a son here who's doing a project on the book for his high school, so definitely going to get the book. Very interesting, but I'm just on a personal level, I just kind of wonder if you were a young attorney when you first started. Boy, how did that mature you from that point to this point? Were you ever at a point where you didn't get paid? I mean, you had to work very hard on it. You had to do some traveling, and I'm just kind of curious.
Sure. Well, it matured me. I don't know. That's another question.
I guess the proper term would be aged.
Basically, the client was happy with the settlement, and the client was happy that it got resolved. I was happy through the resolution. Did it mature me? Sure. I'm not going to say it jaded me by any means. What it did is it told me, even as young as I was then, that,